The crystal chandeliers caught the light as my husband raised his glass to toast. 200 guests smiled back at him. I sat at the corner table, watching him gesture toward the architectural rendering behind the podium. Another luxury development, another reason to celebrate. He'd seated me with the caterers. "To new beginnings," Daniel announced, his voice carrying through the ballroom. "And to the people who actually matter in this business." His eyes swept past me without stopping. His investors laughed. His business partners raised their glasses. His mother, sitting in the front row wearing the diamond bracelet he'd bought her last month, beamed with pride. I sipped my champagne and thought about the flash drive in my clutch. The one containing 3 years of property deeds, wire transfers, and offshore account statements. The one I'd be handing to the FBI agent waiting outside in the coat room. But that wasn't even the real surprise. The surprise was that a pastry chef with a photographic memory for numbers had been tracking everything since the day I overheard him on the phone, laughing about how his simple baker wife would never understand real estate mathematics. Let me back up. 3 years ago, Daniel started coming home later. Not suspicious late, just busy late. Developer late. He'd walk in smelling like expensive cigars and someone else's perfume, kiss my forehead, and head straight for his home office. I'd be in the kitchen, testing recipes for my bakery, covered in flour and too tired to question why he suddenly needed a locked filing cabinet. "How was your day, honey?" he'd ask, not waiting for an answer. "Made any pretty cupcakes?" I had a degree in chemistry. I'd opened one of the most successful artisan bakeries in Portland. But to Daniel, I just made pretty cupcakes. The first time I noticed something wrong was at our annual Christmas party. Daniel introduced me to his newest investor, a man named Victor Chen, and the numbers didn't add up. Daniel mentioned selling him a property for $1.8 million, but I'd seen the listing price online that morning. It was listed at $2.4 million. I have this thing with numbers. Always have. When you spend 12 years developing recipes, measuring ingredients down to the gram, calculating ratios and temperatures and timing, numbers become a language, and I'm fluent. $600,000 is a lot of miscommunication. I didn't say anything that night. I smiled, offered Victor a chocolate croissant from my bakery's holiday collection, and filed the number away in my memory where I keep everything else: butter ratios, oven temperatures, and now, apparently, my husband's lies. I started paying attention after that. Really paying attention. Daniel thought I was oblivious. He'd leave his laptop open in the home office while he showered. He'd take calls in the next room while I prepped pastries at our kitchen island at 5 a.m., assuming I couldn't hear him through the wall or was too focused on folding dough to listen. He had no idea I was listening to every word while my hands worked on autopilot, creating perfect croissant layers through muscle memory alone. The numbers kept appearing. Properties sold for less than their listing price. Money transferred to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Shell corporations with addresses that matched empty lots I'd drive past on my way to restaurant supply stores. I started taking photos. First of documents he left on his desk. Then of his computer screen while he showered. Then of text messages on his phone while he slept beside me, snoring after another late night celebrating a successful closing. I learned about money laundering the way I'd learned about sourdough starters, through obsessive research and careful observation. I spent my early mornings, the quiet hours before the bakery opened, teaching myself to read property deeds and wire transfer records. I created spreadsheets that looked like recipe development sheets. I documented everything. My bakery manager, Teresa, noticed I was distracted. "You okay, Sarah?" she asked one morning, watching me stare at my laptop instead of checking the morning's croissant production. "Just working on something new," I told her. It wasn't a lie. I was developing something new. Just not a pastry. Daniel's pattern became clear after 18 months. Every third property sale went through a shell corporation. The money would circle through 3 different accounts before landing in the Cayman Islands. Then it would come back as investment capital for his next development project. Clean money. Legal money. Money that had originally come from Victor Chen and 2 other investors whose names kept appearing in the documents, men who owned nail salons and car washes and restaurants that somehow generated enough cash to invest millions in luxury real estate. I knew what this was. I'd watched enough crime documentaries while waiting for bread to proof. I also knew Daniel was having an affair. That part was almost boring compared to the financial crimes. Her name was Jessica, one of the real estate agents who worked under him. She thought she was clever, texting him while I was supposedly asleep. She didn't know about the other woman, Monica, who worked in his office. Or the third one, whose name I never learned, who he'd meet at hotels on business trips. The affairs barely registered as betrayals anymore. They were just data points. Evidence, patterns that proved what I already knew. My husband thought I was too stupid to notice anything beyond fondant and frosting. His mother, Patricia, reinforced this at every family dinner. It must be nice, she'd say, her voice dripping with false sweetness, to play with cakes all day while Daniel does the real work. Sarah's little bakery is so cute, she told her bridge club friends at our house one afternoon. I was in the kitchen, supposedly preparing dessert, but really photographing the papers Daniel had left on the dining room table during their card game. His sister, Michelle, was kinder but still dismissive. You should sell the bakery, Sarah. Daniel makes enough for both of you. You could focus on giving mom grandchildren instead of making fancy bread. They didn't know I'd won 3 international pastry competitions. They didn't know my bakery had been featured in Food and Wine magazine. They didn't care that I employed 15 people and cleared $500,000 in revenue last year. To them, I was just the wife who baked, the pretty wife who'd never understand Daniel's complicated business world. I let them think it. The turning point came 14 months ago. I was delivering a custom cake to a corporate event when I ran into an old friend from culinary school, Marcus Williams. He'd left the pastry world to become a forensic accountant after his family's restaurant got caught up in an embezzlement scheme. We had coffee. I asked careful questions about financial investigations. He asked about bread recipes. By the third coffee meeting, I trusted him enough to show him a single spreadsheet, just one property transaction, anonymized, nothing that could be traced back to Daniel. Marcus looked at it for 30 seconds. This is money laundering, he said flatly. Textbook case. Whoever's running this is going to federal prison. Hypothetically, I said carefully, if someone had more documentation. Hypothetically, Marcus replied. They should talk to the FBI before they become an accessory after the fact. That night, I lay next to Daniel while he slept, his arm thrown carelessly across my body, and made my decision. I wasn't just going to leave him. I was going to end this the right way. Marcus introduced me to an FBI agent named Rachel Kim. She specialized in financial crimes. She looked at my documentation for 2 hours without speaking. How long have you been gathering this? She finally asked. 2 years. You've built a better case than most forensic accountants. I'm good with numbers, I said simply. Rachel explained the process. They'd need more evidence. They'd need time to build a parallel investigation. They'd need me to keep acting normal, keep documenting, keep being the oblivious wife who just baked pretty cakes. Can you do that? Rachel asked. Can you stay married to him while we build this case? I thought about the prenuptial agreement Daniel had insisted on, the one that gave me almost nothing if we divorced before our 5th anniversary, which was still 8 months away. I thought about his smug face every time he introduced me as my wife. She makes cupcakes. I thought about Patricia's condescending smile and Jessica's text messages and the 3 years I'd already wasted. Yes, I said. I can do that. The next 8 months were the longest of my life. I smiled through dinners. I delivered custom cakes to Daniel's business events. I listened to Patricia explain that Daniel needed a wife who could match his ambition, implying I wasn't that wife. I watched Jessica at office parties, wearing a necklace Daniel told me he'd lost. I documented everything. I photographed new property deeds. I recorded phone conversations using an app Rachel gave me. I copied files from Daniel's computer onto external drives. I became a ghost in my own marriage, present but invisible, exactly like Daniel had always treated me. The bakery became my refuge. Teresa knew something was wrong but didn't push. I spent longer hours there, developing new recipes with an almost manic energy. A chocolate torte that won a regional competition. A croissant that got written up in the New York Times. A wedding cake that booked me solid for the next year. My business exploded while my marriage died silently. Daniel didn't notice either. 3 months before our 5th anniversary, Daniel announced his big event, a charity gala to celebrate the groundbreaking of his biggest development yet. $100 million luxury complex on the waterfront. His crowning achievement. He'd invited every investor, every city official, every person who mattered in Portland's real estate world. This is important, Sarah, he told me. Try to look nice, and maybe don't mention the bakery too much. These people aren't interested in desserts. I was catering the event. My bakery had won the contract in a blind bid. Daniel didn't know he'd left all the minor details to his assistant. Rachel Kim saw the opportunity immediately. "This is it," she said during one of our secret meetings at a coffee shop across town. "We'll have agents positioned throughout the event. When you're ready, you give the signal, and we move." "What's the signal?" I asked. She smiled. "You tell me. Make it something he'll never see coming." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "A cake," I said. "I'll make him a special cake." The night of the gala arrived. I'd barely slept for a week, preparing desserts for 200 guests while putting finishing touches on my evidence and trying not to vomit from anxiety. Teresa had asked if I was sick. I told her I was just stressed about the event. The ballroom at the Sentinel Hotel looked like something from a movie: crystal, marble, flowers that cost more than my monthly bakery rent. Daniel's development rendering stood on a gilded easel behind the podium. His investors mingled with champagne flutes. City council members networked. Patricia held court in a corner, accepting compliments on her son's success. I wore a simple black dress. Daniel had suggested I skip the event entirely. "You'll be busy with the food anyway, right?" But I'd insisted on attending as his wife. He'd been annoyed but agreed, probably because Patricia said it would look bad if I wasn't there. He seated me at table 17, with the event coordinator and the florist, not with his investors at table 1, not with his business partners at table 2, not even with his family at table 3. Table 17. In the back corner, behind a column. Perfect, actually. I could see everything from there. Including the FBI agents Rachel had positioned as waiters, bartenders, and guests. I'd spent 3 days creating Daniel's special cake. 5 tiers covered in fondant the color of money, different shades of green, meticulously blended. I'd hand-painted each tier with images from his development projects. Property addresses in edible gold leaf. Account numbers hidden in decorative scrollwork that most people would miss. To everyone else, it looked like an elaborate tribute to my husband's career. To anyone who knew what they were looking for, it was an evidence map. The cake sat on a special display table near the front, a spotlight making it gleam. Guests had been photographing it all night, posting it on social media, commenting on the talented wife who'd made it. Daniel had barely glanced at it. Dinner ended. Daniel stood to give his speech. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice confident and warm. "5 years ago, I started this company with a vision. I stopped listening. I'd heard this speech before, in various forms at various events, the self-made man narrative. The risks he'd taken. The dedication required. The support of his team. He never mentioned me. 10 minutes in, he gestured to the rendering. "This development represents everything I've worked for. $100 million in investment, creating luxury housing for Portland's elite, jobs for hundreds of workers, and a crown jewel for our city's waterfront." Applause. Patricia beamed. His investors looked smug. Jessica, sitting at table 4 in a dress that cost more than she supposedly made as a real estate agent, gazed at him adoringly. "I couldn't have done this without the people who believed in me," Daniel continued. He named his investors, his business partners, his mother, his sister, his assistant, his lawyer, his architect. "Not me." He started to wrap up. "So here's to new beginnings, to taking risks, and to the people who actually matter in this business." I stood up. The movement caught attention because I'd been so still all night. Daniel's eyes found me in the back corner, behind the column, at table 17 with the help. "Sarah?" he said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Did you need something?" I walked forward. The room went quiet. My heels clicked on marble. 200 people watched me approach the podium where my husband stood. I stopped in front of the cake table. "I made this for you," I said clearly, my voice carrying in the silent room. "Every detail represents your work. Your properties, your investments, your success." Daniel's expression shifted to confusion, then pleased surprise. Thank you, honey. It's very pretty. Sarah's a pastry chef," he explained to the room, as if they needed clarification about why his wife had made a cake. "She's very talented with desserts. I'm also very talented with numbers," I said. I pulled out a small knife from the table, a cake server, really, but it caught the light dramatically. I cut into the bottom tier. Inside, instead of cake, was a hollow space containing folders. I pulled them out one by one, placing them on the white tablecloth. This property, I said, pointing to an address painted on the second tier, was purchased for $2.4 million and sold to Victor Chen for $1.8 million. The difference was wired to an account in the Cayman Islands. I opened the first folder, showing the wire transfer records. Daniel's face went white. Sarah, what are you? This property, I continued, moving to another painted address on the third tier, was never actually built. But you claimed $4 million in construction costs and pocketed $3.2 million through a shell corporation called Beacon Holdings LLC. Another folder opened. Victor Chen stood up from table 1. Daniel? This property, I said, touching a gold leaf number on the fourth tier, was purchased with cash from your three main investors Victor Chen, Robert Martinez, and David Park. Money from their businesses. Money that needed to be cleaned before it could be invested in legitimate real estate. I looked directly at Daniel now. He'd gone from white to gray. His mouth opened but no sound came out. I've been documenting everything for 3 years, I said to the room. Every property deed. Every wire transfer. Every shell corporation. Every offshore account. I have photographs, recordings and testimony that prove systematic money laundering, tax fraud, and wire fraud totaling over $40 million. Patricia stood up. This is ridiculous. I also have evidence of affairs with at least 3 women, I continued, not looking at her. But honestly, that's barely relevant compared to the federal crimes. I turned to the FBI agents positioned throughout the room. Agent Kim? Rachel Kim emerged from where she'd been standing near the bar, badge held high. 3 other agents appeared from various positions. Daniel Morrison, you're under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and tax evasion. The ballroom erupted. Investors surged toward exits. City officials looked panicked. Daniel just stood there, frozen, as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. I don't understand, he whispered, looking at me. You make cupcakes. I have a degree in chemistry, I said quietly, just for him. I've won 3 international pastry competitions. I built a $500,000 business from scratch. And I have a photographic memory for numbers, something you might have noticed if you'd ever actually paid attention to me. I pulled out another folder from inside the cake. These are divorce papers. I'm filing on grounds of adultery and fraud. Our 5th anniversary was last week, so the prenup is void. My lawyer says I'm entitled to half of everything except you don't actually own anything, do you? It's all shell corporations and offshore accounts. So, I'm just taking my freedom. I handed the divorce papers to his lawyer, who'd gone as pale as Daniel. Rachel Kim was reading Daniel his rights. Other agents were approaching Victor Chen and the other investors. The gala had turned into a crime scene. Patricia pushed through the crowd toward me. You vindictive little. I have recordings of you, I said calmly, telling Daniel to hide assets from me. Advising him on how to structure the prenup. Encouraging him to undervalue my business so I'd get less in a divorce. That's conspiracy to commit fraud, Patricia. Your lawyer might want to call you. She stopped cold. I turned to the room, to the guests still frozen in shock, to the reporters already filming on their phones. For anyone interested in authentic artisan pastries made by someone who actually understands chemistry, molecular structure, and complex mathematical ratios, my bakery is called Nightingale's. We're open Tuesday through Saturday. I picked up my clutch from table 17. On my way out, I stopped at table 4 where Jessica sat in her expensive dress, mascara running. The necklace looks lovely on you, I said. Daniel never lost it. He gave it to you 6 months ago. I have receipts. I smiled. Also, you're the other woman. Not the main woman. Monica from accounting has been seeing him longer. Thought you should know. I walked out of the Sentinel Hotel ballroom with my head high, leaving behind my husband in handcuffs, his mother in shock, his business in ruins, and a 5-tier cake that would be evidence in a federal trial. The FBI investigation took 8 months. Daniel was convicted on 17 counts and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Victor Chen and the other investors faced their own charges. Patricia's involvement earned her probation and community service. Jessica and Monica both lost their real estate licenses. Michelle, Daniel's sister, called me 2 weeks after the arrests. I'm sorry, she said. I never knew. I should have paid attention. I should have respected what you built. Thank you, I said. Because what else do you say? The divorce was finalized while Daniel was awaiting sentencing. I got the house fully paid off, in my name only, purchased years before he started his illegal operations. I got my bakery. I got my freedom. Nightingale's expanded. The publicity from the trial was bizarre food bloggers writing about the pastry chef who took down a crime ring. I hired 2 more bakers and opened a second location. Teresa became my business partner. I started teaching classes at Portland Culinary Institute, not just pastry techniques, but business mathematics, financial literacy, and how to protect yourself legally. Half my students were women leaving bad marriages. I taught them to trust their instincts and document everything. 6 months after the trial, I was developing a new croissant recipe when my phone rang. Unknown number. Sarah Morrison? A woman's voice. It's Sarah Nightingale now, I corrected. I'd taken back my maiden name. This is Janet Park. David Park's wife. I went still. David Park was one of the investors, currently serving time for his role in the money laundering scheme. I'm listening, I said carefully. I just wanted to say thank you. Her voice cracked. I didn't know what David was doing. When the FBI came, when everything came out, I was terrified. But then I learned you'd been gathering evidence for 3 years. You'd been brave enough to expose everything. And I thought, if you could do that, maybe I could be brave too. What do you mean? I'm divorcing him. I'm taking control of our legitimate businesses. I'm starting over. Like you did. A pause. You probably think I'm stupid for not knowing. I don't think you're stupid, I said. I think we're taught to trust the people we love, and I think bad people take advantage of that. She was quiet for a moment. There's a group of us now. Wives from that night. We meet sometimes, help each other figure out the legal stuff, the financial stuff. Would you maybe want to come speak to us? About how you knew. I thought about it. About the 3 years I'd spent feeling alone, gathering evidence in secret, wondering if I was crazy. About all the women sitting at table 17, invisible in the corners of their own lives. Yes, I said. I'd like that. The first meeting was 12 women in a church basement, looking nervous and defeated. I brought pastries, of course. I brought pastries and we talked. About noticing things. About trusting our instincts. About the difference between loyalty and complicity. About taking back our power one documented transaction at a time. One woman, Emily, confessed she'd found suspicious bank statements but was afraid to investigate. Start with one thing, I told her. One number that doesn't make sense. Write it down. Then find another one. Build your evidence piece by piece, like you're following a recipe. You don't need to understand everything at once. You just need to pay attention. These meetings became regular. Then they became workshops. Then they became something bigger, a nonprofit I founded called The Numbers Don't Lie, teaching financial literacy and investigation skills to women in vulnerable situations. Teresa thought I was crazy, taking on so much while running 2 bakeries. But I couldn't stop thinking about all the women who were still sitting at table 17, being dismissed and underestimated, watching their husbands get away with crimes because no one expected the baker or the teacher or the nurse to understand complex financial fraud. I taught them that understanding isn't about having a business degree. It's about paying attention. It's about trusting yourself when the numbers don't make sense. It's about knowing that your skills, whatever they are, have value beyond what anyone else recognizes. 2 years after the gala, I was featured in Forbes. Not as the wife who took down her criminal husband, though they mentioned that, but as a successful entrepreneur running multiple businesses and a nonprofit. The headline was Sarah Nightingale, When Precision Meets Purpose. The article included a photo of me in my bakery kitchen, surrounded by perfect croissants, holding a spreadsheet. Patricia sent me a letter from her community service organization. I almost didn't open it. When I did, it was short. You were right. About everything. I taught my son to undervalue strong women because I'd been undervalued my whole life. I'm sorry I did that to you. I'm trying to do better. Patricia. I didn't respond. Some apologies are too late. But I kept the letter anyway, tucked in a folder in my office. A reminder of what happens when we teach people they're worth less than they are. Last month, I was teaching a class on financial documentation when a young woman raised her hand. How did you know? She asked. How did you know you weren't crazy, that something was really wrong? I thought about Daniel's voice saying made any pretty cupcakes. I thought about Patricia's condescending smile. I thought about sitting at table 17 behind a column while my husband thanked everyone but me. I knew because the numbers told me a story, I said. And when the numbers contradicted what I was being told, I trusted the numbers. Numbers don't lie. People do. I paused, looking at the 20 women in the classroom, all of them at different stages of discovering their own strength. But more than that, I continued, I knew because I knew my own worth. I'd built something from nothing. I'd mastered a skill that requires precision, creativity, and intelligence. And when someone tried to tell me I was just playing with frosting, just making pretty cakes, just being a simple wife, I knew that story was wrong, because I knew what I'd accomplished. And once you know your worth, really know it, no one can convince you you're worthless. The class was quiet. Then one woman started clapping. Then another. Then all of them, these women who were learning to trust themselves, to document their own truths, to stop accepting the story someone else was telling about their lives. That night, I stayed late at the bakery after everyone left. I made a batch of croissants, the recipe that had won me the New York Times write-up, the one Daniel had never tasted because he'd been too busy at his office, conducting his illegal business, sleeping with women who weren't his wife. I made them perfect. Exactly 729 layers. Butter content precise to the gram. Temperature monitored to the degree. Mathematical perfection turned into art. Because that's what I do. I take raw ingredients and precise measurements and careful observation, and I create something beautiful, something nourishing. Something that matters. And I always have. I just had to prove it to everyone else before I could finally, fully believe it myself. The croissants came out golden and perfect. I packed them for tomorrow's class. The women would appreciate starting with something beautiful. Then I locked up the bakery, got in my car, and drove home to the house that was mine now, completely and legally mine, where no one would ever again tell me I was too simple to understand the complicated world of real numbers and real business. Because I'd always understood. I'd just been waiting for everyone else to catch up.